reason why the Mets are the Mets is because somehow they've managed to have a assortment of soft tissue injuries that happen every year. The same type of soft tissue injuries. And they've tried to address it, but it just doesn't matter. So to go from 4 games up on August 1st to 8 games back now, in the blink of an eye, and your best pitcher, DeGrom, doesn't pitch. Lindor and Baez, I don't know why they got Baez, because he's opposite of what they need, a low on-base percentage guy who's not really slugging for much now to make any contact. And their starters overall, if you've seen Walker and Stroman, the two of them have won, I think, 2 games since the beginning of July after doing really well in the first half. So it just speaks to the Mets' inability to have depth, the inability to be able to adjust to changes. Atlanta's had the same issues. I mean, they lost their best player in Acuna, and they've had multiple injuries on their pitching staff, losing Soraka. Their bullpen was a disaster, but they made real deals at the deadline. If you notice the guys they got, like Duvall
tons of outfield
and
depth.
Soler, those guys have driven runs and scored runs. You know, they might not hit for an average, but they're productive. And then the other thing you should look at is their infield. They have 4 guys that could hit 30 home runs. That's never been done before in Major League Baseball. So, you know, you can hate the Braves, and I certainly don't like the Braves at all, having to report on them. But the Braves are a pretty good organization, and they made the right moves at the deadline. The Mets didn't, but the Mets never do. They always shortchange their fans. They always do the cheap thing. And you would think that they would do more now.
Baez wasn't a cheap move.
What's that?
Baez isn't cheap.
Yeah,
it's wrong, but it wasn't cheap.
Well, describe cheap. Cheap as in not getting enough. Cheap as in maybe getting a player, but not really fitting their needs. So, yeah, maybe not cheap, but like stupid or not exactly looking at what their needs are and getting something that's going to help them improve. Because Baez was just the wrong fit. And you could see it now. Now he's a free agent, isn't he? I mean, didn't they just – and the guy they traded him for, Crow Armstrong, was maybe he's not Jared Kelnick, but he's going to be a pretty good prospect, and that's what they didn't want to do. I feel for Mets fans. I really do. And it's just another season that they looked like they were going to do something, and now they could wind up like 10, 15 games out of first place by the end of the year. Anyway, I said my piece.
All right, so we're going to get into some NFL stuff as well with Mark. Here we go.
All right, first question I have for you, Mark, and you can bring the music down just a little bit. What are your thoughts to Zach Wilson, his first 2 preseason games? Is he for real? And I know it's preseason, but what you've seen, is he for real? And should Jet fans be excited?
I like his ability to get outside the pocket and his ability to find receivers. And it seems like he can improvise pretty well. Now, again, preseason, look, we saw Browning Nagel look good in preseason once upon a time. So you can't really put that much into it. But I thought him and Justin Fields have looked the best of all the quarterbacks taken in the draft. Obviously, Mac Jones has looked pretty good too, but you figured he would with the system he was in. And Trevor Lawrence has really got nothing to work with, so he hasn't really looked. He's looked about as he should look. But Wilson definitely looked the best of all those guys, with his performance last week. I thought that Justin Fields, with his first performance in his preseason game, where every first couple possessions he fumbled and looked bad, he recovered really well. So going into last week's start, I thought Fields had an advantage. But after week 2, I would say probably Wilson's better. And for 2 starts, Wilson's a little better than Fields, but there's really not that much. If they don't start Justin Fields, they'll be making a mistake, the Bears.
All right. So the Jets right there with Zach Wilson. Yeah. Are you surprised that the Jets have been jinxed? They lost their 2 pass rushers. Yeah. Vinny Curry is out for the season, might be out career-wise with his blood situation. Yeah. And then obviously Carl Lawson rupture Achilles tendon. What are your thoughts to that? What should the Jets do? Should they go through free agency? Should they make a trade? Where do you think the Jets and Joe Douglas go?
Yeah, I mean, Carl Lawson is a guy who graduated from Auburn, and he had been productive at Cincinnati, but never really was able to make tackles. But you always saw him in the backfield when you looked at film. The guy was always back there. He was always in position to make a play. And his body was kind of awkward, but he was beating Becton time after time after time in practice before he got hurt. That's a huge, huge loss. I feel really bad for him because he had put so much into it, and the Jets kind of built their whole offseason around him. And so to see that happen, two guys really put in time, and this was like his turn to really take over and become a star. I feel bad for him. To say of the Jets curse, no, it's just the Jets, you know? I mean, things happen. Curry's a guy who I thought could fit in well, but he's kind of, 33 years old, and he's kind of seen the best days. But he would have been a good fit, assuming that they had other guys and they played him in a rotation. Not enough to do it by himself, but I think that, those guys you can't just replace. You can't, certainly not Lawson. You're not going to find another guy like Lawson. So, to replace him with somebody as a free agent or a trade isn't really a realistic possibility. They can continue to add to depth and make sure that they just have guys coming in and out that maybe can take advantage of, say, the system. But they're not going to get a guy who can consistently rush the passer and cause havoc like Lawson would.
All right, you look at the AFC, surprise team in the AFC going into the season, and who do you think is taking a step back this year in the AFC? Are the Patriots a contender if Mac Jones takes over the team as the starting quarterback?
I think the Patriots are a contender because they made some really good moves, notwithstanding Mac Jones. I thought all the offseason moves that Belichick made, they have quality depth, and it seems like he brought in the guys that he likes. The only thing that kind of worries me a little bit is that when he's brought in really good free agents before, like when he brought in Marsh or Welker, they put up good numbers, but they didn't win. And then even like with an Adalius Thomas, it seems like when he has good players like that, it doesn't always lead to ultimate Super Bowl success. But, I think that they'll be better than they were last year, and I think they'll be in a position to where maybe they can challenge Buffalo, depending on how quickly that Mac Jones develops. As far as teams taking a step back, maybe Baltimore might be in that position if Jackson doesn't continue to play well. He's had really great regular seasons, and that's not really the question behind him. It's his postseason inability. So maybe I would look at Baltimore in that sense in a really strong division. The Browns, I think, are going to be better. Pittsburgh is kind of in that position as well. Maybe I would put them there too, as falling off the radar a bit. Yeah. I mean, Cincinnati is going to be, it's going to be who they are. So, I think Cleveland really is a team to beat in that division. In the South, maybe I like Tennessee. Baltimore, Indianapolis, I could see taking a step back because they don't have Phillip Rivers, who, we know he's not a big play guy or a guy who's going to be successful at the end of the game, but he'll win regular season games for you. So I would say probably either Baltimore, Pittsburgh as teams that might slip a little bit as far as what they did last year.
What about the quarterbacks that are on the fringe right now with Justin Fields, with Trey Lance, with Mac Jones, guys like that, or even some of the teams with veteran quarterbacks like the Saints, like the Broncos, teams like that? Who do you think wins a lot of those QB battles? Could you see a lot of those rookies doing well right away?
Well, I mean, and not in a rookie battle, but I think Jameis Winston is better, and I think he's developing more into the Saints system. If he can, all he's got to do is cut down on his interceptions. I mean, it's easier said than done. But if you remember when Vinny Testaverde came to the Jets, or even before that when he went to the Ravens, I mean, he threw 35 interceptions one year, 13 touchdowns, 35 interceptions. So, and he turns into a pretty good player. So I think Winston has that capability. All that matters is how comfortable he gets within that offense. So I think he's going to win there. When you look at the Bears situation, I would go with Fields. I don't care what else they have there. Fields is the future. He's a guy that looked a lot similar to what Lamar Jackson can do, which is if you don't have it there on a pass, just his ability to get outside the pocket and run for yards until the defense figures it out and takes that away from him. I think he's going to be really effective if he can complete, say, 64% of his passes. I think he's going to do really well his rookie year. Obviously, Mac Jones is going to win out there. And who else did you ask me about now?
The Broncos, Teddy Bridgewater and Drew Lock.
Yeah, look, Bridgewater is a guy that had a great career ahead of him, got injured. Another guy the Jets let come in and just let him go. And every other place, including Carolina, didn't really seem that he was part of their future. Kind of like Tyrone Taylor. Well, he made the playoffs with the Bills, and he went to the Chargers, and it's like everywhere he seems to go.
Cleveland, too, with Baker.
Yeah, everywhere he seems to go, he's preparing for the next guy. So I think you could probably say the same thing about having a brain freeze here. What team were we talking about?
The Broncos.
Yeah, the Broncos. You could say the same thing about Bridgewater. Is that Bridgewater was in places where it looked like he could be the starter, and then something would happen where he'd lose his job, and then he's looking for another team. But Bridgewater can play, and I think he should definitely play for the Broncos. I don't like Locke as much as I like Bridgewater. There's no choice between the two. I think Bridgewater's still young enough, athletic enough, and I think he's really hungry to get back and show that he's better than people think he is. And because of that injury, he has a lot to prove.
Mark, you mentioned the Saints real quick. Obviously, Drew Brees' leadership is no longer there. Michael Thomas has clearly already shown that. Do you think Michael Thomas does get traded? Because Jameis Winston's going to need him. If Jameis Winston has any success this season, he's going to need Michael Thomas to get open. If the Saints trade Michael Thomas, I think there's a rebuild in place. Do you think that too, or you just think Michael Thomas would be a spare piece to go?
By the way, it's great to hear your voice, man.
Wow, what's going on, buddy?
I'm glad you're back, man. I really missed you. I love hearing you and Errol talk about things, man. It brings me back to old times. So, I love it. Errol, you guys have great chemistry. I'm really glad you're back. I missed you, and I'm glad you're doing this again. Tyler, I always thought you had talent, Tyler. So.
Oh, thank you. You might want to say that one more time, just a little bit louder. Not everyone can hear.
Errol knows you too. I just love how you guys bend your back and forth. But I think, look, if Thomas doesn't stay, it all depends on how Winston plays. I think Winston's good enough to get them back where it's not that significant of a dropout. Now, obviously, Brees a Hall of Fame quarterback, and Winston's a guy who isn't, okay? But you never know when someone like a Winston's going to take that next step. We saw it with a guy like Jim Plunkett, who Plunkett was off. He was a guy that had absolutely nothing but failure before he came to the Raiders, and then he just kind of got it. And same thing with like a Richard Gannon. He had just the same type of success when he went to the Raiders after failing with other teams. And you could say the same thing with Testaverde. So with some of these veterans who have talent, if they're put in a good situation, they might be able to achieve to where they lead their team to the playoffs and maybe even further. And I think Winston has that ability.
You look at the NFC, Seattle, a lot of people is going to take steps back. Russell Wilson in the offseason wanted his way out. Now all of a sudden he's still on the team. If they do have a bad season, is the coach Pete Carroll, being that he's the oldest coach in the NFL, and the last year we're going to see Russell Wilson in the Seattle Seahawks jersey. It seems like all those great players from the Legion of Boom, besides Wagner and him, this is a completely different team for those championship teams. Is this a year that they're going to take steps back? Jamal Adams got that big contract. I think it was a big mistake. Yeah, right. Do you see them a contender this year or a complete joke in the NFC?
Well, I don't know. I don't think it'll be a complete joke unless Wilson gets hurt. But look, Carroll will stay as long as Wilson's there, but Carroll's kind of on his way out, and there has really been no accountability as far as Wilson's concerned for that miserable mistake he made to cost them that Super Bowl. it seems like they'll blame everybody else, but he's never really taken accountability for that.